Make
I
sure
am
you tell
Emily
her that.
Litchfield. I am the Director of AmeriCorps and Volunteerism Initiatives with the state of Arizona at the Governor's Office of Youth, Faith, and Family, and I am so excited to be able to host the 10th annual Summit on Volunteerism and Civic Engagement. 10 years is a long time to be doing anything, I think. And, you know, it's not our regular in-person sessions that I enjoy so much. I like to be able to connect and network with each and every one of you who are attending those. But the virtual sessions seem to be so much more accessible. I am seeing and meeting some new folks who maybe wouldn't be able to attend in person. We've had some folks attending even from out of state, which is always really exciting. Today is the third day of 4 days of workshops, and every session I say it's the best session that I attended. So we have the most brilliant, the best and the brightest presenters with us this week and sharing all of their tips and tricks on how to implement service and volunteerism initiatives within your city, your state, your organization, and who are more than willing to connect afterwards to continue conversation and to get you more information if you need. I'm very happy to introduce our presenter for this afternoon, Amy Box. Amy is the Advocate Program Manager at the Arizona Attorney General's Office on Victim Services, and she has worked in victim services since 2001. Amy holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Political Science from the University of Arizona and a Master's of Educational Psychology and Human Relations from NAU. Go Lumberjacks! Amy began her work in victim services in 2001, working with victims of juvenile offenders. In 2004, she joined OVS as a lead advocate and carrying a caseload of trial, appeal, and death penalty cases. She moved into her current role in 2011 and as an advocate program manager, supervises advocates and staff, works on policy and legislative development, and oversees the volunteer intern program. She manages OVS grant applications and reports to ensure continued funding and program development. Amy still provides direct services when needed and is a NOVA-trained crisis responder. In 2017, Amy was awarded the Attorney General's Michael C. Cudahy?
I think it was Cudahy.
Oh, Cudahy. I'm close. Award for mentoring. Amy serves as a resource for victim service providers in Southern Arizona, assisting agencies such as the Board of Executive Clemency, the Department of Child Safety, and the Arizona Supreme Court's Commission on Victims in the Court's Restitution Committee. She has taught classes and trainings and conducted presentations on victims' rights, victimology, and volunteer program management for the Arizona Victim Assistance Academy, the Arizona Prosecuting Attorneys Advisory Council, and the Governor's Office of Youth, Faith, and Family. Amy is the chair of the Arizona Coalition for Victim Services and also serves as a Pima County Victim Compensation Board member. She also serves as an ambassador for the Special Operations Warrior Foundation out of Tampa, Florida. Let's welcome Amy to the workshop today. Thank you for presenting.
Thank you very much, Emily. If I knew you were going to have to read all of that, I would have shortened that down for you, but thank you very much for the warm welcome. For those of you who haven't done the math, that works out to about 20 years in human services and 16 years here with the Office of Victim Services, working with nearly every type of victimization through prosecution and appeals, as well as those capital cases like Emily said. So it's a little bit of everything from start to finish and all types of victimization types, providing direct services. I'm also a big believer in volunteerism, and I spend a good amount of my time volunteering. Like was mentioned, the Pima County Victim Compensation Board. I also do a lot with the DPS Memorial 5K that's down here in Tucson. And for many years, brownies through seniors, I was a Girl Scout leader down here in Southern Arizona. So donated a lot of our time and effort and love and devotion to Girl Scout Council. So I've been involved with our volunteer intern program since I started with the office in 2004. And so this program has been in existence for more than 20 years. And that's what I'm basing my workshop on today. So that's kind of the foundation of where I got my start and have built upon that program since I got here. Let me go ahead. I'm going to share this screen. All right, and everyone should be able to see the PowerPoint. I will note that Randy's going to put in the chat the link for the handout. So you'll have the slides. You'll also have some sample forms, some of the things that I mentioned. You will have those in your handouts after this session, or you can download them now if you're working the dual screen and have those available to you. You're also always welcome to reach out to me if you've got questions. I don't know all the answers, but we can figure it out together. So briefly, the objectives for today is we're going to identify the benefits and challenges of a volunteer intern program. We're here about volunteerism, civic engagement, but now we're going to take those volunteers and make them interns and how that benefits your office or agency and what some of those challenges might be in working with that sort of setup. We're going to identify some of the necessary steps to get it off the ground. And maybe that's for a whole new program. Maybe that's to enhance a program that you already have, something that might already be in existence. We're going to talk about discover what students are looking for. It's fine when we think about what we want to get out of having volunteer interns, but what's the benefit to them? Why are they going to bother to come and apply at your agency or organization to volunteer as an intern? And then we're going to run just a few common issues that I've seen over the years in working with volunteer interns. I'd like to kind of have a conversation. It is a big group. Thank you very much. So feel free to comment in the chat, ask questions. Randy and Emily will take a look at those and I will address those, and we'll make time at the end for any final questions as well. And I welcome anyone who is willing to unmute themselves and actually have a conversation other than just on the chat if you're able to. All right. The first thing up today is I'd like to have a poll question. If we can open that one and only poll. I know everyone's probably done this in just about every session, but this is really for me. Do I need to stop sharing, Emily? So this is asking about your agency or organization, about what your level, I'm asking for what kind of level of experience you have working with volunteer programs right now. So it looks like thank you everyone that's responding. We're about halfway there. So it really looks okay. I'm seeing a lot of, almost half of you that have replied have an established volunteer intern program. That's fantastic. And so the majority of the group altogether accepts volunteers as interns, but might not be formalized, or it is formalized. So that's great. So if you have thoughts and ideas, feel free to share with your peers. Maybe you've got something working for you in your program that we don't have here at the Attorney General's office that might benefit them just as well. And if you're brand new and haven't started, hopefully I'll give you some ideas where you can at least have a starting point where you could walk into someone's office on Monday and say, I've got an idea. Okay. All right, we can close that poll.
You may have to close it on your screen too, Amy.
There we go. There we go. Okay. So throughout this program, I'm going to talk about, use the term VIP or VI. They are very important people, definitely to our program. We couldn't do our work here at the Attorney General's office without interns. But VIP is the volunteer intern program or a volunteer intern. You might choose to call it differently, that's fine, but the principles remain the same for our volunteers. So the question is, why should I develop a volunteer intern program? And for those of you that don't have one, you might already have some ideas forming about why you would want to develop. Not should you, will you, can you, but why? Maybe we think it's easy and it can be arranged and developed in a day, right? You think, okay, what are they going to do at the office? You kind of jot it down. This is what an intern would do. You find them some random way. Volunteer interns pop up and appear in your office, and you tell them what to do. You get free labor, and you say goodnight at the end of the day, right? Super easy. It's what we do with volunteers, right? Hey, welcome. Hi, here. And they're off and running. Most of us know that that's not the case. It's definitely not the case. So when we get back to the initial question is, why do we develop and how do you get started and should you get started? So that approach is really to determine why develop it? Well, what's the purpose of the program? You know, how does this volunteer program fit within your agency and organization? It's one thing to develop a volunteer intern program, but then have no idea who they're going to work with and what they're actually going to do, what their role is. And you really do have to weigh the benefits and challenges. Using volunteer interns is a fantastic way to help meet missions and goals, but maybe it's not the right time. Maybe you need to kind of flush this out a little bit and just start a process, not expecting to have interns in your office in May, but maybe we can look at the fall semester or the spring semester. And then you really have to start thinking about who those stakeholders are that are going to come and help. You're going to invite them to assist in that planning and build investment in the program. And don't just think about your section. If you're part of a larger organization, your particular program, think about outside of that. You want to invite everyone that might bring something to the table and share thoughts and analysis to the development of this program. Okay, that might include HR, that might include a grants program. Do you have if this might affect your grants in some way, using as match, something like that? And what about your management staff? So let's identify some of those benefits and challenges to a volunteer intern program. Okay, first up, the benefits. You've got fresh ideas and learning in the office. Students are, first of all, they're right in the mix with the most current practices, the most current learning, the most current ideas and philosophies and research that they can bring to your office. I've been here 20 years, or 20 years in victim services. I don't like to say, those of you faces and names that I do recognize, don't comment. I like to think that I'm not entirely set in my ways, but I have developed a practice and a way I work with volunteer interns, the way I work with crime victims, that may not be the best way anymore. And so volunteer interns can come in and bring those fresh ideas and learning into your office and into your team. So you can learn from them. They're going to learn from you. You can learn from the volunteer interns. It is low cost labor. I'm not going to say it's free, depends on your program. And I'm also not going to say it's free because there's usually costs associated with setting up a program, minimal as they might be. Also, volunteer interns are eager for the experience. They either are looking to branch out into the field. A lot of them are students, and they're also eager for an internship in general because sometimes their program requires them to do an internship. So they want that experience. Also, it's oftentimes their first time in a office environment or a workplace environment, other than what we think of as kind of common college jobs, right? So they want that experience that then they can take. They've learned all this from the books, from their professors, from their courses, and now they want to put that into practice. It's also a benefit of working with non-traditional students. We get a lot of like return to school students. They might be older. They might have already had one career, but have decided to switch paths. So we don't have to think of our traditional college students as volunteer interns. You're also feeding your field. We have not as many anymore, but there was a period of about 10 years here at the Attorney General's office where all of our interns in victim services interns with our office. The training that they get through their coursework and then through their internship makes them a prime candidate for employment, either in your own agency and organization or somewhere else in your field. Okay, the more you can train and educate that next generation of advocates, social workers, therapists, your next policy advisors, your next, AmeriCorps volunteers, that keeps us growing and building as we move on to the future, because we're not always going to be here. It also, the benefit is community involvement and appreciation. We get well-respected internship with the universities, primarily U of A and ASU. I will say lumberjacks, it's much less polarizing in this state to say that you're a lumberjack versus anything else. So we'll just go with that. But we've built that relationship. They appreciate that. They send us students. And it's also that community involvement, because we are going out, we are meeting with victims. The interns are going to the courthouse. They are attending events like for National Crime Victims' Rights Week, and meeting and being out in the community and doing different projects and events. So we're kind of building that, as well as our victims who interact with our interns are almost always, in my experience, I'd say 99% of the time, happy to have had that engagement with an intern in that office, because they recognize that this is someone who is trying to learn and become someone to help others that have been in their situation. But with benefits come challenges, right? Definitely a flip side. Time is perhaps the most challenging. If your agency or organization doesn't have the time to properly develop and utilize a volunteer intern program, maybe now isn't the time. And that's okay. That's important to know just as much as if it is the right time. I tell interns that come into our office, they think I want to be a lawyer. I want to do criminal law. And after 6 months with their office, they're like, I don't know if I wasted my time, but I'm not sure I want to go into law anymore. It's not a waste of time. You probably just saved yourself a lot of time, energy, and money to know what you don't want to do as much as what you do want to do. Same thing with the program. So make sure that you've set aside the time to develop and utilize the program to your benefit and the interns. You or your program manager, or however you're going to structure this, whoever's going to be responsible for overseeing the interns, they're going to have more management responsibilities. So that is something to consider of what that person's workload already looks like. You don't want to burn out your program managers any more than they probably already are. But that is something to consider, because they're going to have to look at recruitment and selection, training, evaluations, and paperwork. So what is that adding to their already probably extensive caseload? Or how can this be, when you're looking at that challenge, can we balance it out? Can we have intern program managers? Can we take something else, lessen some other work responsibilities, and put that somewhere else? But it is something you're going to need to consider for that person. And how are you going to schedule your volunteer interns? Are you an 8 to 5 Monday through Friday kind of agency, or do you have different hours? How are these hours going to play into scheduling volunteer interns to fit their needs and your needs? How will regular hours play into scheduling non-traditional students? So if this is a student who does work 40 hours a week and is going to school but has to do an internship, how is your program going to help fit in their hours to meet their needs as well? So scheduling can be a challenge. I've got a couple more challenges, but before I continue, if you have any questions or comments about the benefits or challenges or anything we've talked about so far, go ahead and put them in the chat, and I'll ask before we go on to the next section. Okay. And if you want to save them for the end and just drop a whopper, that's perfectly fine too. So other challenges are costs and funding, not necessarily in terms of salary, but consider workspace, computer stations, training and resource costs. Recruitment materials could have a cost. Sometimes, job volunteer intern fairs at the universities might be free. They might be reduced cost depending on the nature of your agency or organization, or they could be $500 just to go and set up a table at a internship fair. That could have a cost just to recruit your interns. What about insurance needs? Are you the type of agency, or are you doing some sort of service or job that requires everyone who's performing a service to be covered with insurance? That's another good reason to make sure that your HR personnel are involved as stakeholders in planning the program, because they're going to know all of those things that have to be taken into consideration from the personnel standpoint that the rest of us doing program management probably don't think about, that are always taken care of on the back end that we just assume magically gets done. So if you include your HR as stakeholders, they'll make sure that that happens. Also, you have to take into account the human hours of existing staff spent on the program during the development, and then once your interns are in place. So how much time does your current education specialist spend now getting the interns up to speed? How much time are you taking away from the duties that they should be doing and spending on the volunteer interns? Does confidentiality play into your work? So rules pertaining to confidentiality or privilege may play into the work interns can or can't do. Or do you need to offer some sort of additional training on this subject? We do, within victims' rights, we do have confidentiality and privilege with our victims, between the victim and the advocate. We extend that to interns as well, and we go over that in the training about the confidentiality with the material that they're working with in the course of their internship. But that may be a bigger issue when you are a mental health organization where you're working with people in crisis. Maybe there's some sort of licensure requirement to actually work with individuals. So your volunteer interns might have to do something that's not hands-on as much as perhaps a volunteer intern advocate is. So challenges may also exist depending on what type of organization you are. So for me, in a governmental agency, there's still a great deal of bureaucracy involved in recruiting and selecting interns. I can't just post and bring them in and have them start the next week. It's just not going to happen. It takes time that may not affect nonprofits as much, depending on what kind of work you do. In a nonprofit, you may have interns coming up kind of against volunteers, some of them long serving. And so now you've got these new interns coming in, you've got these long-standing volunteers, and you want to make sure that those two groups mesh and incorporate well with one another for nonprofits. And then lastly, maybe you're developing a volunteer intern program because of a grant requirement. For us, we operate under a Federal Victims of Crime Act grant, or VOCA, and volunteers are a grant requirement, just volunteers. We've chosen to use our volunteers as a volunteer intern program. So we use those volunteer intern hours as match on our grant. So that's something to consider, and another good reason to have your grant programs manager or staff as part of those stakeholders. Unless you happen to wear all these hats, then it might just all be on you, and you've got to have all these things to consider. But think about that as far as grants go, of how that could play into with your volunteer interns. Do we have any questions, Emily, on challenges or benefits? Oops, before we move forward.
I don't see any questions in the chat box. I was just chatting with Randy, though, that you could literally replace the word intern with AmeriCorps member, and then it's all the exact same considerations for, you know, how do we really build this program and integrate all levels of leadership within the organization to have conversations about what it means to integrate these folks into the programming. So I'm glad that you're hitting on all of those. I do see that Justin has his hand raised, though.
Yes, thanks. I'll make it quick. You had mentioned, talked a little bit about insurance requirements, I guess, like from our end of things, or the organization wanting to host volunteer interns. I was wondering if you had any insight on insurance requirements for wherever you're getting the interns from, I guess, like if they're through a student program, if you're aware of those kinds of requirements.
Sure. Thanks, Justin. So from our end, it's handled, you know, having an intern here at the AG's office, they are going to be covered by state coverage if something were to happen to them here, I believe. They work that out through HR. As far as the university, not that I'm aware of, that I've had them go through. Now, there may be a difference when we're dealing with a program such as ours, where we're just going as a volunteer intern program versus a service learning program. That might be different and have a different level of program requirements on the university than we do with ours. So that wasn't a full-on response, Justin. Most of the time we're having the interns work out what they're doing with the university. That's between the student and the university, and we don't get involved with that. I think
Thank you for that. No, that helps. I'll kind of consider service learning versus this, so when I look into things more. So thanks for that.
Did anyone else want to unmute and ask a question? Otherwise, we'll talk about development. Okay. Excellent. So where do you start if you don't have one? You've got absolutely no volunteer intern program, but you like the idea and you want to get started. So where do you start? It's just a little thing. It's just, you know, a little bit here and there. Not really though. It looks like a lot to even begin to get a program off the ground, but it can be relatively simple and quick, depending on your agency or organizational requirements, the buy-in you get from your agency, the size, and your staff support. So we're going to break this down, all of these thoughts and considerations. We're going to break these down as we go. So first up is, did someone have a question? Okay, so first we're talking about planning and organization. We're going to invite those stakeholders, like I said, in your organization to assist in the planning and build the investment in the program. If you have this idea into your intern program, have the rest of your agency or organization may not be as successful as you're going to hope to be, okay? Because you're not going to get buy-in from the rest of your peers. So think more about than just your section if you're part of a larger organization, but think about some stakeholders. Who would you invite? If you were going to send out this email Monday morning to start a volunteer intern program, who are you going to include? Who's going to be on that email distribution list? Is it going to be HR? Like I said, when determining whether or not interns can be paid, have to be paid. I'm not going to pretend to be overly knowledgeable on this issue, but does the Fair Labor Standards Act play into it with interns? It's possible. If that is something you're looking into and you don't have a full-on HR section, the Department of Labor has a wage and hour division fact sheet number 71. That's a really exciting title. I don't know where the government comes up with their creativity in naming things, but it's a fact sheet number 71 that talks a little bit about internships with some labor laws. So something to consider as well. Further stakeholders, grants program, management staff. What about your own peers? That's a great place to start. If you've got a team that you work with on a regular basis, and you have this idea about how a volunteer intern program could benefit your work, start with the people in the office or the cubicle or the desk or the one that you meet on Friday morning to have coffee with. Start there. See what they think. What thoughts do they have on it? Do they think it's a good idea? Are they going to back you? It's a great place to start to already build some of that buy-in before you even take it up to the next level in your chain of command, so to speak. Then you're going to want to create a plan. And I don't mean from start to finish, but write it down. Start thinking about it. Plot it out so that when you take it and you send out that email on Monday morning and say, hey, I've got this great idea to create a volunteer intern program. Let's all meet and hash it out. And then you show up and you've got nothing. It's going to take that much longer and people are going to be like, oh, I'm in another meeting to set another meeting and nothing's going to get resolved here. So kind of plot out what your ideas are going to look like. What are they going to do? What are those responsibilities going to look like? Kind of develop some timelines and some responsibilities so we can start tasking these things out. You're going to look at the HR stuff. We're going to think about how these could benefit or impact our grants. You're going to work on a kind of a job description. Start farming out those responsibilities and make sure that everyone involved knows their role and the deadlines associated with those tasks. Because whereas I said, you can do this in a short amount of time, if this is just going to trickle in, the longer it takes, the longer before you're going to have those interns sitting behind a desk or meeting with a child in the classroom or whatever the case may be. You're also going to need to develop your policies and procedures. And I'm talking about two different sets here. The first is a set of policies and procedures for the program itself. And they don't have to be long. We're just talking about outlining how you do recruitment and training, everything we're talking about here today. It makes it easier on staff who are going to be working with these volunteer interns to have those available and provide consistency to the program so that you don't have one semester where you're doing job fairs and university listservs or a variety of different recruitment tools, and you've got great and then the next semester you're like, I don't remember who I contacted for the job fair, so we'll just skip that and we'll send out an email and we'll see what happens. Well, then you can't be surprised when your applications drop drastically because you got a lot of good response from that intern fair. So those policies and procedures of how you're going to do that part of the recruitment comes in handy and keeps you consistent across time. They're not stagnant, they will get updated, but it gives you a basis where you're working from and all the staff know that. The second set of policies and procedures, and maybe you won't call that because again, government worker, we're not super creative when it comes to titling things, but is for the volunteer intern to follow in their daily work. All right, develop some sort of handbook, a manual or a guideline, however you want to phrase it, because that way they won't feel like they're floundering and just sort of, I don't know, they're just shuffling papers and sitting there and maybe answering the phone and they really don't know why am I here? Why did I bother to come in today? Because I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. It also shows them that your program has structure and is not just some sort of fly-by-night operation that's kind of winging it with something that's very important to them, because if they're doing this internship for credit, they need it for their degree work. So we want to make sure that we're giving them something. That's how they're getting paid a lot of times. It's that work for those credits. It's an awful lot of work to get 3 credits, maybe 6 on the high end towards their degree. Early on, this procedures manual for your volunteer interns is probably going to be a work in progress. If you can start it, I will say they are great in developing that manual early on. Your first couple groups, if they know it, that they're part of this process, will probably go a long way in helping you develop that procedures manual and writing it even. As they are learning the job and you're developing it as you work with them, they can contribute greatly to creating that policies and procedures manual. And the nice thing about ours is, well, I think so, is it's almost we also have our interns use our advocate program manual, which is essentially kind of a if-then kind of thing. Any scenario, not any, there's always something new, but you know, if the court sets this, do this, A, B, C, D, E. If the defendant does this, do this, A, B, C, D, E, and goes through that process. So over time, your interns not just are doing the work by rote, but they're learning and they know, so that 2 months from now, when the court sets this hearing, they don't even have to look at that manual. They know what to do. They know what the next steps are. That's what you're aiming for with having a good set of procedures so that they can learn it. So recruitment, you want to make sure that your recruitment has a solid base, because it's the foundation that you're going to build your program on. You need a position description. It doesn't have to be overly detailed, but it should give interested candidates an idea of the position and the responsibility they'd have. You don't have to outline everything, but a general idea. You need to have an announcement to send out and post, and it needs to not hopefully be boring. I'll be honest, if you look at ours, it's online. Well, it's only online when it's posted, but it might be actually in the downloaded handouts, but it's not exciting. It is not exciting in the least. But again, working for a state agency, we're restricted, a little bit more on what our office is posting. So if we could spice it up a little bit, we would, but it's the same one that's going out for all the other sections and job descriptions. So if you have a way to make that announcement catch your interns, to catch those students' eyes, whether they're reading the third listserv email about internships for the day, or they're scrolling through something on their departmental website, something that's going to catch their eye. Do some outreach, talk to other groups and see if they'll post for you as well. So for example, as part of the Arizona Coalition for Victim Services, we have our membership base. And so when we're looking for doing job descriptions or posting for jobs for other agencies, they'll send them to us and we'll share them. We would do that if they're looking for interns, if they're looking for employees. If you know that there's a particular club on campus that you'd like to reach out to, send it to the club, not just a particular department. Send it out far and wide and use your net to spread it a little farther. And then find your partnerships. Develop partnerships with the schools. Kind of know who the intern coordinator is, say for, like for us, we get a lot of U of A students out of the psychology department. Do we know who our psych department intern coordinator is? So that they can talk to us and we can talk to them and they know and trust us and vice versa. So they're willing, when a student comes in and says, oh, I'm looking for an internship. I know I have to don't know what to do. If they've got an interest in crime or trauma or victimization, that internship coordinator is going to think, I've got something for you to look at. So by developing those partnerships, you can actually help that recruitment process because they'll be able to send people your way. And I talk a lot about the universities because that's the bulk of where we're getting our interns from, but please don't forget your community colleges. They have a wide variety of students, very diverse populations, a lot of non-traditional students who might also be working as well as going to school. So include them in your recruitment to internship coordinators at the community colleges. So when we're thinking Pima, Rio Salado, Maricopa, all the different programs, include them and give consideration to those students as well. All right, so once you've recruited, you're gonna have some sort of way of selecting your interns. So this is another section in your own program procedures. Okay, how are we going to select these volunteer interns? You now have gotten a stack of resumes coming in, resumes, cover letters, interest, applications, however you choose to have them submit. Now you're going to have to go through them and you're going to have to make a decision, because you probably can't take them all unless you are looking for that many volunteers. Could happen, but for the most of the time, you're going to have to weed some of them out and figure out the ones that are going to benefit you the best and that you can benefit. So first off, who's going to be in this process? Again, I'm always going back to thinking about your stakeholders and who else is involved. You could do it alone. I wouldn't recommend it. It's a lot. So the more people you've got as part of this committee, again, you don't want too many in there to kind of muddle things up, but when you've got a good core group that are making these decisions and making the action, making everything happen, it will be easier. So who are you going to include? Here with Victim Services, it's all of the advocates in the office. So when Tucson and Phoenix offices are recruiting and selecting interns, those intern resumes go out to everybody. Everyone's going to be looking at them. Everyone's going to kind of narrow down who they think would be a good fit for the particular office, whether Phoenix or Tucson, and then schedule those individuals for interviews. So for us, everybody's involved. So having been interns and are working with groups over the years, they have an idea how to review those. They know what to catch, to look out for, what to catch onto. And the reason I say that is because sometimes the interns, and I've had interns say this, so like, I didn't think you'd pick me because there was nothing on my resume that made it look like I'd be good at this job. We all know that. It goes back to the whole thing. We were probably all in similar boats. How do I get the experience without the experience, and vice versa? I can't have it if I don't have it. That makes no sense. And they're still in that boat. So the advocates are good at knowing the history of volunteer interns we've had, what kind of programs they're coming out of, how to translate what's on their resume, because they have skills. They just may not know how to tell you what their skills are. They may have only worked retail over the summers for the last 6 years and can list what they do, but they don't know how to translate that into the skills they have of working with the public, of how they have working under pressure, how they have working under short deadlines, things like that. So you kind of have to sort of pull that out of those resumes and cover letters. And that's where, for us, the advocate's knowledge of working with the volunteers comes into play. Those advocates are also conducting the interviews and making the selection. It does take time. This is where we have to consider the human hours going into building the program, because each semester there's a good week where they're going to take a big chunk of it to do interviews and review applications and all of that and do the appropriate paperwork. So we pass candidates, once we've made our selection, we pass candidates up the chain for approval, and then HR kind of takes responsibility for arranging fingerprinting and background checks before any formal offer. I say that, and that is part of our selection process. You'll see it on the screen in front of you that background checks are a requirement here at the AG's office, and depending on your agency, they may be a requirement for you. So don't skip them just because they are students and volunteer interns. You never know what a background's going to pull up, and if that is something that you have to take into consideration for your agency, make sure you're getting them done by a reputable source. Placement is easy because we're recruiting interns for our sections, but occasionally we get other Attorney General's office sections with interns who have an interest in victim services. So they may kind of do a cross internship kind of thing. It doesn't happen as often, and it's not formalized, but they may come over and spend a week with victim services, shadowing advocates and going to court and meeting with victims and kind of learning what they do, because maybe they're in our special investigations and they're working with agents. And same thing. We see it a lot in our criminal justice field, is this interest in all aspects of the system a lot of times. And when we're dealing with volunteer interns who are trying to figure out where they want to be in the system, we like to be able to make sure they can kind of see a little bit of everything. So if they're interning for us, but they can go spend a week with special investigations, great. Doesn't have to be formal. They can just spend some time over there. So for us, placement is easy. If we're having them come with our program, they're in the Office of Victim Services. But then if we can get them out somewhere to see a little bit more, we will. If you are creating a program for a larger agency, you will have to think about placement. Maybe you're bringing in 20 new volunteer interns and you've got to farm them out between 4 different programs. Well, then it's kind of like, who has priority, who needs what, where are the interest areas for these interns, and where are they going to go? So you're going to have to think about placement once you've made your selection into your different programs. So training. Training is really a combination of orientation and the actual job training. Okay, so you can decide whether or not these are done at the same time or not. So we've done both over the years. When I first started in victim services, we did it all. We did the recruitment, the posting with the university, the job boards, the new employee orientation. We did all of it, from recruitment all the way through final evaluations. A few administrations ago, here at the Attorney General's office, it was decided that HR would take over that posting and recruiting and the orientation part of the program. And I'll be honest, I was hesitant at first, but after about a semester or 2 of having HR doing the recruitment, the new employee orientation, all of the, drug policies and workplace discrimination and harassment, and all those types of trainings, I was more than happy to recognize the benefit of letting HR do what HR does. So we had that available to them. And then that used to be part of the training, but now it saves us time to go into more detail about the work they're going to do within victim services during our actual training. Our training program is pretty intensive, I think. We cover not just what the VI needs to know to do the work, but also topics that they would need to know in order to work in the field. So even if it's not something that they may do on a daily basis here, it's something that as an advocate out in the greater victim services environment, they would probably need to know. So we want to make sure that they're getting an education out of their internship and not just doing the work. So this is knowledge they're going to take wherever they may end up in victim or human services. So we cover an introduction to the criminal justice system. And that may seem basic, but maybe not to our criminal justice students, but it might be to our communication students. Everyone's knowledge of the criminal justice system may come from innumerable reruns of Law and Order on TNT, right? And so there's a very short period of the criminal justice system that in general, the American public gets. So there's a lot more to it. So we make sure that they have that. We're all about victims' rights here at the Attorney General's office. That's one of our primary goals, is to make sure victims are aware and knowledgeable about the rights that they have guaranteed to them by the Arizona State Constitution. So we go over all of those rights. We talk about victimology. We talk about being active listeners. We bring in guest speakers like homicide survivors, prosecutors, agents to talk about the work that's being done in the office, because victim services doesn't work in a vacuum. So let's bring in all of our partners. Who are we all working with a team to also give some information to these interns so that when they're walking down the hall, they recognize faces and they feel welcomed. They understand how victim services fits into a larger picture, and they livens things up. I mean, you can only talk about crisis intervention for so long before people are like, I need to tap out. And that's the other thing we do because of the nature of the work and depending on your agency's work is self-care. If I knew back in 2001, the things we know now about self-care, things would have been much different early on in my career. So my goal is to make sure the next generation of advocates have that information so that they can stay involved and engaged in the work they're doing for longer periods of time. So we make sure we cover that. All told, it's about 2 days in the classroom each semester at the beginning of the semester before classes start, so that we're not trying to juggle, well, John has a class from 10 to 12 and Melissa's won't be back until 3. We don't play that with our training. It starts before the semester starts. It's generally 2 days, and they are 6 to 8 hour days. Not usually 8 because the advocates need to get a little time, but think about that. How are you going to work that into your program and your schedule with your staff to get the training out of the way? Is it going to have some classroom training, or is it going to be all on the job? Ours is a combination, because those 2 days, they get a lot of that knowledge on victimology and victims' rights and criminal justice. Then when they start working, it's going to be more hands-on. This is the computer system. This is how we track down victims. This is how we generate letters. This is how the phone works. All of that. Altogether, it's a total of about 24 hours worth of training for each volunteer intern to get started. Then they do have training along the way throughout the semester as well. Okay. We encourage that ongoing training. Any free in-person training that the advocates can do, the interns can do. Anything that we're bringing into the office, they can also do. It adds to their experience with the office and what they're taking back for their program work. Think about when you're developing your program about how supervision is going to work. Who's going to do the daily supervision? Is that program manager going to be responsible for every day that the interns are there to making sure that they're doing the work and they know what the tasks are for the day? Or can that be spread out? Who's going to be responsible for that supervision daily, weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly? And then over the course of the internship period, what's feedback going to look like? You know, is there going to be a midpoint evaluation? Is there something where the intern can also give feedback about your program? As much as you want to know that the interns are being effective, you want to make sure your program is effective for the students as well. And it's that supervision goes on for the entire internship period. So even as an unpaid volunteer intern, they are still representing your agency. So you want to make sure that that supervision is there from day one to the last day, because they are maybe a face for your agency or organization. So if you don't have the time to really adequately supervise or have someone take that role, you might need to take a little pause and flesh that out a little bit more before you move on. How are you going to measure the success of your program? So we're talking about a couple different things here in terms of measurement. You want to measure the effectiveness of the student. Okay, this may be through the university or college evaluations. You might complete these for the student so that he or she can get credits. Like they'll bring that in and it says how many hours they worked and kind of their general responsibilities. Maybe they had a project, but you would sign off on that evaluation so that they can get their credit with the school. I would suggest keeping a copy of these evaluations in their volunteer intern file. We also keep a referral worksheet on all of our interns so that down the road, when we get some sort of, we see their name again after they left the program, I get a lot of Supreme Court ethics evaluations because they want to be admitted to the bar, they finished law school, and now it's someone who interned 5 years ago. We can go to that referral worksheet and know all their basic characteristics about how they worked for our office and any special projects they did, how many hours they completed, so we can complete those forms. I had the Peace Corps reached out years ago to an individual who I never actually worked with. It was before my time here at the office, but because I had that evaluation available to me, I was able to provide that referral back to the Peace Corps to help that former intern out. I think there's also an example in the workshop materials as well. Then you're going to want to measure the effectiveness of your program so that you can make changes as they're needed. If we have to change the process, the work duties, anything to kind of enhance the program, especially in those early months and years with a new program, how do you know that it's being effective? So we use exit evaluations when volunteer interns leave, and we do make changes or adjustments to the training or the work based on those comments. We do ask them to be candid. And then you need to maintain your records. So, and I'm not saying, you know, whatever HR is going to require for your agency personnel standards, but it may be similar to staff and personnel files. It may be completely different. But if you can be organized, so if you need to provide that referral or a letter of recommendation down the road, you still have something to base your evaluation on. And if you use your volunteer intern program as like grant match, you're going to need to make sure that you're maintaining those records in case you have an audit. So make sure you keep those as well. For us, those would be the timesheets the interns do. So when they come in, I know it's archaic. They're still on paper, but we have track of all those hours that they're submitting that we're using for match. So if VOCA comes in and wants to verify, you know, all these match dollars, we're saying we can show all the timesheets for those interns that provided those hours. And then lastly, here in development, you want to think about in your program development, your recognition and retention. Okay, they're important parts. We don't pay our volunteer interns, so sometimes a thank you is, you know, it goes a long way. So recognition, it's motivating, and should be kind of a back and forth throughout the program, not just one time on their last stay, but make sure that they know and are being recognized throughout their time in the office. It could be as easy as snapping a picture of the intern and you've got a board in your staff area or area where clients can see it about something that this intern did so they can see them. And then later on, you know, the next week, another staff member can say, hey, I saw you on the board last week. Great job on that phone call with that victim. Super easy, not a lot of effort, not a lot of time, but it goes a long way in motivating that intern, which can lead to recognition, or I'm sorry, to retention. So you'll keep positive and motivated volunteer interns for the term of your internship, but it might bleed into another term. So we do 6-month, January through June, July through December, 2 internships a year within the direct services program. And sometimes if we've got a great intern who is not just wanting to do the work, but wanting to know why they're doing it, they want to learn, they've produced really good work, they write well, they interact well with victims, we might offer them the chance to stay for an additional 6 months. Because they feel recognized and a part of the team, they may be willing to stay. So if you can motivate and recognize the work that they are doing, you may get more time out of them in the long run. The nice thing about that too is then interns that have stayed for a second semester become guides and mentors for the next interns coming in. So now they're not only learning how to be advocates, now they're also leaders and mentors. So that's another thing that you can think about of another skill that you're giving them. Are there any questions, Emily, on kind of developing the program? Or does anyone have something to pop in with?
I do not see any questions in the chat. Oh, wait, I just had one come in. Wonderful presentation, Amy. Would you be willing to share the referral worksheet that you mentioned? And I believe, was that part of the documents that Randy uploaded early?
I think it is in there, but whoever's asking the question, if it's not, or if you want it in a Word format instead of PDF, so you can copy and paste it more easily, my contact information is at the end of the slides. And you're welcome to email me and I'll send it to you in a clean version that you can copy and paste. Okay, absolutely. I'm a big believer in sharing and not having to recreate the wheel. So if you ask, and I can give it to you, I absolutely will. So let's talk a little bit about your existing programs and making your program stand out from other agencies and organizations. Like I said, there are a lot out there. And so students do have choices when they're looking for internships. So look at your availability of office work versus kind of the field work, right? In our office, the volunteer interns don't do anything that our advocates don't do. It's not always fun and exciting. There are no really cool NBC shows about victim advocates yet, but it's nothing that we wouldn't do ourselves if they weren't there. So we kind of look at that balance. We make sure that we can offer other opportunities to add excitement or at least variety to their learning experience. You know, in a non-COVID type environment, those are like little field trips. We might go out to a family advocacy center to learn about programs that are going on there for victims. We often take a tour out to the state prison complex in Florence. We've gone out to the jail, and then you can work with students and understand the difference between prison and the jail system because they're not the same. So any way we can give them a little bit extra to frame their experience with, we will do that. And it adds more to your program and makes it stand out. We want to have those opportunities. Colleges and universities are always looking for places where they can refer students. And I mentioned that build those relationships, not just for recruitment, but on a continuing basis. Make sure that you are, you want to make your program stand out by being responsive to the universities. I said earlier, the internship is an agreement between the student and the university. We don't get involved in that. We don't say how many credits it's worth. We don't say, you know, anything like that. We just agree that we're going to fill out whatever the student may need from us and what the university needs, that they can count on us to do that. We're not going to make them come knocking 3 times trying to get an evaluation because they need to close out this student's grades for the semester so they can graduate. That's not how we build relationships. So make sure that your program stands out by being effective and responsive to the university and to the students' needs. I mentioned thinking about community colleges. I'm also going to mention high schools. There are a lot of eager and motivated and brilliant students out there in the high schools who are looking for work study programs and internships. So if that's something that is feasible for your agency or organization, look at establishing relationships with those high schools.
Amy, I've got a question for you. My question is around those relationship building opportunities with colleges and universities. So if we've got a specific type of student that we're looking for, would you recommend putting together like a proposal, or is it just a matter of getting connected with the person who oversees any type of volunteer requirements that are from those students? And just, you know, a cold email saying, hey, we want to be one of those approved, you know, organizations that you refer people to.
I think that's the easiest way, Shannon, because it's more personable. Oftentimes the university, you know, they aren't super formal. It's not like we're doing a presentation trying to get interns into, say, like Apple or Intel or something. But if you have a connection we had an intern that then went on to become an advisor for the psychology department. So I knew her and she connected me with her supervisor. So kind of build on those that you may already have established, maybe from current volunteers or interns, but just find out on the university website or call the department, who's your internship coordinator for the, you know, undergrad social work program. You know, it's Amy Box. Awesome. Can I get her email? Or you know what they all are because they're all, you know, .edu, you know, whatever. And just start it that way. Can we have a conversation? Can I come meet with you? Or can we do a WebEx? You know, something like that, and have a conversation about our program, because I'd really, you know, be appreciative if you'd consider, you know, offering it as a suggestion to your students. They love that. In my experience, they love that. Yes, they are, you know, they're limited on their time as well, But if they can make that connection, that makes it easier on their end too. So I think that's the easiest way. You know, if they want something more formal, but I would start out with an email or phone call just to find out who their internship coordinator is for the program.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure. So what are students looking for, right? So regardless of whether or not you're looking for straight volunteers or volunteer interns, you need to think about what your base is looking to get out of their time with you. So they're looking for continuing education. They can read about it in the books and the philosophies and the papers, but can they get the hands-on education from your internship? They're looking for referrals. They're gonna, I mean, I don't pay in dollar bills, I pay in letters of rec. It's kind of how it comes down. Okay, so they're looking for referrals and recommendations for other jobs after graduation. They might be actually looking for a job. Like I said, for quite some time, a lot of our advocates had been interns, or they get picked up in other areas of the office because of the time they spent here. They also want, sometimes they just want the name of your organization on their resume and the experience. That's okay. If they did the work, fine, you get to put the Attorney General's Office of Victim Services on your resume. Maybe you weren't a fire starter, but you did work for me and you did a good job. Congratulations, they get that. They're also looking to explore careers. You know, when we've had a couple come in that, you know, I'm thinking about law school. I don't know if I would want to do criminal law or civil law or blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, well, we happen to have a lot of different types of lawyers in this office. Let's set you up with them and just kind of make the rotation. Introduce them to people and set up those meetings so they can talk to a civil attorney, so they can talk to an environmental law attorney. And then a lot of times they're looking for mentorship. And maybe that's going to extend past the time that they're with your office. I have a lot of interns that I still hear from once or twice a year, looking for advice, just want to check in, see how things are going, and still have that connection and maybe some guidance or just a sounding board as they're moving forward in their own careers. So that's kind of what they're looking for. And they really are getting a lot out of an internship. They are getting that real world experience, the workforce expectations. Most of us, you know, probably know what it's like going into an office and the office politics, not about anything that's being done, but about how the refrigerator system works, right? Being in an office is a whole new world for people when they first start being in an office, when they first start doing field work and they have to make sure that they've, you know, what do I take in my go bag? If I'm going to be doing field work, what do I need to make sure I have? They're only going to learn that, you know, from working with this advocate who's got, you know, a great field bag and go out and do the work. So they're getting those expectations. They're applying their classroom learning. They are building skills and hopefully their confidence and motivation. You know, we hear that a lot with volunteer interns when they leave. It's like they didn't think they could do this job. They didn't think that they'd ever be able to call up someone on the phone and kind of, you know, talk them through what's going to happen next at this hearing before a superior court judge on a case that they're a victim, but they did, and they're really good at it, and they feel confident moving forward about how they're going to be in their own profession. So those are the skills that we're building. And just a few last common issues when working with students. Issues crop up in all agencies. They can't be avoided. They're not necessarily reflective on you or your organization or even the intern. Things just happen. Go through a background check. Always, I would encourage some way, shape, or form for you, because these volunteer interns are going to be representing your agency or organization, even if it's something as easy as scrolling through their social media pages, not from their side, but take a look. If they're not completely private, what are they putting out there? Do you do a formal background check with fingerprinting? Maybe, especially if you're working with kids. That's probably a requirement for you to have them if they're going to be in the office. What if the volunteer intern isn't a good fit? It happens. We've had interns that we've asked, you know, I just don't think this is working out for both of us. Let's have a conversation. and then the interns have left. Sometimes it's a good conversation. They're like, you're right. Here's where I'm coming from. What are you saying? And then they stay and things get better. But it's not for everybody. Being a part of the Attorney General's office isn't for everyone. Working with victims is not for everyone. And so we recognize that. It's not necessarily anything that either party has done, just doesn't work. What if the volunteer intern just wants the agency on the resume and isn't committed? Okay, are they doing the job? If they're doing the job, then that's fine. I love the interns that want to know not just what to do, but why they're doing it and how does it play into the system. But that's not the case with every volunteer intern, and that's okay. What do you have to do for student projects? Is that a part of their internship? I've done interviews, I've done videos, I've helped volunteer interns, they put together a case file that they then took to their internship advisor and said, this is what I do. And it was kind of a template of all the different types of letters they sent out and how they documented and all the different types of things they solved. So they could kind of be like, this is a case file and this is how I would work with a victim, all made up, but that was their student project. Other issues are about referrals. How are you allowed to do referrals or recommendations in your agency? Can you do a letter of recommendation? Is that permitted? That's something that may crop up. And also, do you want to do a letter of recommendation sometimes? Sometimes someone will come back, and how are you going to have a conversation about someone who may not actually want a letter of recommendation from you, but they don't know it? That shouldn't happen. Hopefully with feedback, an intern, when they leave your office, kind of knows where they stood throughout the process, and it never got to that point, but it is something to consider in the future. And these are some issues on the other side. What are some common intern issues that they see from us? Coordination. Do we look like we're just running amok and have no idea what's going on? They want to make sure that that's there. Training. Do they feel like they got enough training to be able to sit down on day one and at least have an idea of what it is they're supposed to be doing? Is there structure? If they're just like, I don't know what's going on or who I'm supposed to go to, they're just, they're checking out. Flexibility. They're students. They have other issues that crop up. Can we be flexible with their hours and making up time? Are they engaged? Sometimes interns like, oof, not here. I'm not buying into this. I'm not engaged. I'm really not that vested in it. I'm just going to ride out my time. If that works for them, fine. I would hope that they might come to the program coordinator and say something, but it's possible. So kind of have an idea of how you could address these if an intern comes to you. So I'm going to wrap up. I want to give time for a few minutes for questions before Emily closes down. But in your slides, there are 3 towards the end that are this traffic light: red light, yellow light, green light. So just think about the questions on each of those slides about what would stop you from implementing your plan. Kind of maybe yellow light is starting just to kind of think and outline and think about a timeline, and then going into green. What can I do today to start this process? Who can I email right now to kind of put this thought into motion? So think about those, the things that might stop you, the little things you can start, and when you're raring to go, where you can take off with that. Okay, so remember, we know the benefits. We know it's not just picking somebody in, hey, you look great in that classroom, come be a volunteer intern. Be effective and efficient in your development, and you will have fabulous interns who will come back and visit and stay in touch and be effective tools in your own organization. I have victims who still remember the intern that helped them on their case. And that was only like maybe 3 hearings. So they can make a difference. So contact me, email me. I can send you any of those forms like we talked about earlier. That's where you can find me. Email's probably the best. Are there any last questions? Comments? I'm going to stop sharing this. So in the handouts, the slide with my email is in there. So click on that link if you don't have it, because I'm going to make it disappear.
Quick question.
Yes.
Two actually. One was, hi, I'm Hayden, by the way, and awesome presentation. Really appreciate it all.
Thank
Lots
you.
of great thoughts. First question was, in those handouts, how do we get those? I thought you mentioned it and I just missed it.
There is a link. Randy put it in the chat. Scroll up. There's a link to the PDF attachments, or you can email me and I'll send them to you directly.
Awesome. Second question was, you're coming from a relatively large organization, obviously, and you mentioned feedbacks and how you kind of adapt an intern program based on the feedback of your actual interns. And I'm coming from one where we're going to be kind of inventing it from scratch, having experience both as a volunteer and as building them before. But do you see there being a difference in how a big organization might have to integrate that feedback from an intern versus a small one, and strategies either way?
Yes, I'm coming from a big organization, but victim services itself is relatively a small part. So I kind of think of us as a small group. So I don't think there's much difference, because the importance of that feedback is to make substantive changes to make it a better program. And that should be applied either way. And when you're first starting out and you need that feedback maybe to build your program, maybe Hayden, looking at other similar programs, have interns and see if you can connect with them and get their, like, hey, what did you like about this program, or something similar that you can adapt right off the bat until you build your own.
Awesome, thank you.
Of course. And I saw you, Daniel Torres. Hello, thank you. All right, thank you, Emily. It's all yours. Randy, whoever's popping in.
Sure. Raven, it looks like you were going to unmute right there. Do you have a question?
We're just, we are revamping how we onboard our interns, because our volunteer program is bringing unpaid volunteer interns under volunteer program. And so we're in the current process of building in our software the trainings that are also held at HR that our teams are comfortable with, and trying to channel everything to come through one portal, one streamline, because we've seen that we're the opposite, Hayden. We have a huge organization and everybody has their own channels of receiving interns and how they handle it. So our challenge right now is bringing it all the way into one system so that we can then say, okay, we know everybody who's with our organization, volunteering with our organization, getting onboarded, keeping track of them, measuring them, staying connected, getting feedback. So, the current process now is like building those processes for them, and even getting their feedback in on building the processes for their program. So I don't know if you have any resources or recommendations for more ways to, approach those things, and or how they work with a larger organization like yours.
I don't, because like I said with Hayden, we're kind of insular in the fact that once they're brought in through HR and onboarded there, then they're just ours and we handle that training. I'm thinking that, have you sat down with all those different kind of groups and kind of narrowed down to be consistent and not have can you get agreement on, no, we just need these 5 things?
Yeah, we're trying to get our guiding coalition a little bit more stronger in participation in order to get that those processes and procedures fed down. And we're starting to see some selective participation in certain ways, because we've touched base with certain people saying, hey, if you get interns, send them to us, we're going to get them started. So just more resources for us to look at that, because we're writing those procedures from scratch. And if somebody's already doing it, then we can kind of like see it, mirror it, and not have to, just start from fresh.
What kind of organization are you, Raven?
I'm with a New Leaf. So we have all sorts of programs. We have youth, shelter, behavioral health, everything.
Yeah, we do a lot. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but if I do, if you're at a new leaf, then I would know how to find you, and I can reach out if I can think of anything that might mirror or be similar. If I can, I will.
Yeah, because right now that's where I am. I'm recruiting a couple volunteers that can help write our new procedures for our organization so that we have a better document of saying, okay, this is how we're going to do things. But there's something that's already kind of living that we can say, okay, this is good. And we are definitely mirroring our HR processes as well to make sure that everybody's comfortable with how these interns are still being onboarded and things like that. So
to meet all the legal requirements.
Yes. So it's been an adventure, and we're definitely enjoying the journey and taking this time to, strengthen that. But just any resources that you might have would be great.
I'll think about it and reach out if I can think of any, but I think you're on the right track, because strengthening it, even though it's a little frustrating and trying like pulling everyone in together, is going to be a huge benefit in the long run. So stick it out.
Yeah, we're finding interns we didn't even know we had interns. We know they went through HR, but we're like, are we tracking their volunteer hours, or where's that going? And so we bought a new software, which has been great. And so we're trying to get everybody into the software so we could just measure their impact. Yep. And that's for the whole organization to utilize. So it's a new process. We're just trying to strengthen it.
Raven, I actually have a quick question for you. Are you guys already using a learning management system in LMS?
In LMS,
have you heard that term before?
No, we have a volunteer software that we're using. So we do have we have a fundraising software that measures impacts of our supporters, but we haven't ever had
a different type of platform. So a learning management system is a system that would allow you to kind of input, or a good way to think about it is think of it as like an empty library, and you have the ability to fill the library with all the content and curriculum and information that you need.
Oh, yes. So our software has that.
Oh, does it?
And so HR has their own, and we're trying to build it in our software. So we're bringing HR's trainings under our software. So it's measured in our volunteer software.
I'm happy to connect with you. I've got a lot of experience. I have a background in learning and development. And so I had to manage our LMS, programs at other organizations that I've been a part of. But that may help to create some streamline with some of these other departments and other groups that are managing different teams, and maybe allow you to create some type of curriculum or learning pathway to make sure that there's kind of consistency across the board.
That's the next thing we're trying to tackle, is building training for new hires. So it will they'll receive that coming through on new employee orientation, but we haven't gotten that far yet. So I would love to connect and see if we can have some support in that too, because it's been
I'll
quite a lot of
direct
work.
message you my email.
Okay, awesome.
And that is why we love this Volunteerism Summit, Emily.
For sure. And, and Raven, I know with your organization, I actually worked for a New Leaf for 5 years before I entered the National Service. So, there's so much history and has been around for so many years. And so you're starting to kind of bump up against those kind of organizational culture of, well, we've always done this. And so we just keep doing that. And now we're trying to pull all of those pieces into a central location. So that can for sure be challenging.
Yes, I know Bridget's been talking with you, and we definitely have been, we've definitely been sitting down having those conversations on what to do next. So, but just as much as I'm just looking for more resources so we don't reinvent any wheels that are successful and saves us time.
Sure. And I just put my email in the chat box because I've got a couple of ideas on organizations who have bumped up against the same thing recently, where they're doing so many things and they're trying to centralize, and I can help get you connected if you want to email me. So I wanted I want to say a big thank you to Amy for being here today. You know, all of the information really translates so well into all of the different organizations. And I found myself the whole presentation, I was like, yes, we need to be doing more of that. Yes, we need to spend more time in the planning and development phase. And I know for planning and development, that can be a little bit daunting. And that's really where you're going to spend a lot of your time. So I will put in a little plug for our office and the ability to maybe connect your organization with an AmeriCorps Vista member. And those VISTA members are able to help with that capacity building, writing policies and procedures, developing templates and forms, and doing some of these other kind of project-based work to support your organization in that development. So you can email me to find out more about AmeriCorps Vista.